I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. Balance: $0 and 0 cents. My stomach twisted as I refreshed the page, hoping, praying, that it was a mistake. It wasn't. Ethan had drained every last cent from our startup's account and vanished without a trace. I grabbed my phone and dialed his number for the 100th time. It rang twice before going straight to voicemail. "Ethan," I said, my voice shaking. "Call me back. We need to talk. Where's the money?" I hung up and dropped the phone onto the table, burying my face in my hands. How did I let this happen? The police weren't much help when I filed a report later that week. "This sounds like a civil matter," the officer said, barely glancing at me as he typed into his computer. "You'll need to take this up in court." "Court?" I repeated, my voice rising. "I don't have money for lawyers. He stole everything." He shrugged, handing me a copy of the report. "Sorry, ma'am." The debt collectors started calling soon after. "Ms. Carter," one voice said sternly, "your account is seriously delinquent." Another call came minutes later. "If you don't make a payment soon, we'll escalate this matter." I stopped answering altogether, letting the calls go straight to voicemail. Every buzz felt like another nail in the coffin. When my car was repossessed 2 weeks later, I stood on the curb watching it disappear down the street. My chest tightened as tears blurred my vision. How am I supposed to get to job interviews now? At a coffee shop one afternoon, I sat in the corner nursing a cup of black coffee, the cheapest thing on the menu, and scrolling through job listings on my phone. "You can't fix what you don't track," a voice said from the next table over. I glanced up to see an older man talking to his friend, gesturing toward a notebook filled with handwritten numbers. "Start with what you're spending," he continued. "Then figure out where you can cut back." His words stuck with me long after he left. That night, as I sat in my empty apartment surrounded by unpaid bills and eviction notices, his advice echoed in my mind. You can't fix what you don't track. But pride kept me from asking for help. I should be able to fix this on my own, I thought bitterly. I got myself into this mess. I have to get myself out. Still, deep down, I knew I couldn't do it alone. I sat in the coffee shop again, staring at the empty cup in front of me. The words I'd overheard last week, "You can't fix what you don't track," still echoed in my mind. The older man was sitting at the same table, his notebook open as he scribbled something down. My stomach churned as I debated whether to approach him. Pride told me to leave, but desperation pushed me forward. "Excuse me," I said hesitantly, standing by his table. He looked up, his sharp eyes narrowing slightly. "Yes? I overheard you talking about budgeting last week," I began awkwardly. "I need help." He studied me for a moment before gesturing to the chair across from him. "Sit." "My name's Raj Patel," he said, closing his notebook and folding his hands on the table. "What's your situation?" I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of my embarrassment. My business partner stole all our money and disappeared. My credit cards are maxed out. My car was repossessed, and I'm 2 months behind on rent. He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "You're in deep," he said bluntly. "But you can dig yourself out, if you're willing to do the work." "I'll do anything," I said quickly, my voice trembling. "This will hurt," he warned, pulling a blank notebook from his bag and sliding it across the table to me. "Start here. Track every expense for 30 days. I frowned, picking up the notebook and flipping through its empty pages. "Tracking $2 coffees won't fix this." He smirked slightly, but didn't back down. "Every dollar counts," he said firmly. "You'll never stop bleeding money if you don't see where it's going." Reluctantly, I agreed. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with the notebook open in front of me and started writing down every expense: coffee, groceries, bills, everything. At first it felt tedious and pointless. But within days, patterns began to emerge. By the end of the month, the numbers horrified me. $450 on takeout, $200 on unused subscriptions, $150 on impulse buys, things I didn't even remember purchasing. I stared at the totals in disbelief. How did it get this bad? At our next meeting, I slid the notebook across the table to Mr. Patel. He flipped through it silently before nodding. "You're bleeding money," he said finally, tapping one of the pages with his pen. "Stop the bleed first." "Stop the bleed," I repeated weakly. "Cancel subscriptions you don't use," he said firmly. "Cook at home instead of ordering takeout. Pay bills on time to avoid fees." His advice felt overwhelming, but for the first time in months, I felt like there was a way forward. As I left the coffee shop that day with my notebook clutched tightly in my hands, I realized something. This wasn't just about money. It was about taking control of my life again. I sat on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by piles of things I used to think I couldn't live without. Designer blouses, handbags, and shoes I'd worn to pitch meetings. Each piece was a reminder of the life I thought I was building. Now, they were just liabilities. I picked up a silk blouse, running my fingers over the fabric before tossing it into the sell pile. "It's just stuff," I told myself. "Stuff won't pay my bills." Canceling subscriptions came next. "No more Netflix?" my sister Tara asked over the phone. Her voice carried disbelief. "Nope," I replied flatly, scrolling through my account settings. "I'm cutting everything except internet." "Since when do you eat canned beans and cancel Netflix?" she teased. "Who are you?" "Someone trying to survive," I muttered, ending the call before she could say more. Meal prepping became my new normal. Every Sunday, I stood in my tiny kitchen, chopping vegetables and portioning out meals for the week. Gone were the days of takeout dinners and coffee shop lattes. Every penny now had a purpose. The rideshare job was brutal. Every day after listing items online to sell, I drove for hours, ferrying strangers across town in exchange for tips that barely covered gas. My back ached from sitting so long, and my eyes burned from staring at the road. But every dollar I earned chipped away at my debt. One night, as I sat in my car waiting for a ride request, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Ethan's name flashed on the screen. My chest tightened as I answered. "What do you want?" "Mia." He began smoothly, as if nothing had happened. "I can make this right. Just lend me $5,000 to get back on track." I laughed bitterly, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. "You stole everything from me, Ethan. Why would I ever trust you again?" "Because we're partners," he said casually. "We've always had each other's backs." "Not anymore," I snapped before hanging up. My hands shook as I stared at the darkened street ahead of me. At our next meeting, Mr. Patel handed me a book with a worn cover titled "The Wealthy Stay Wealthy by Living Below Their Means." "Read this," he said simply, sliding it across the table toward me. I flipped through the pages that evening after finishing my shift, each passage hitting me like a revelation. Wealth isn't about what you earn. It's about what you keep. As exhausting as it all felt, the meal prepping, selling everything I owned, working long hours, I could see progress for the first time in years. The debt was shrinking slowly but surely, and with every sacrifice, I felt something else growing inside me. Resilience. The passenger climbed into the back seat of my car, his baseball cap pulled low over his face. He didn't say much during the ride, just gave me an address across town and stared out the window. As we pulled up to his destination, he leaned forward, his voice low. "Hey, I've got a job for you." I glanced at him in the rearview mirror, unsure. "What kind of job?" He pulled out a thick envelope and held it up. $500 to drive a package across state lines. No questions asked. My heart skipped a beat as I stared at the envelope. $500 was more than I made in a week driving rideshare. It could cover a credit card payment, maybe even two. "What's in the package?" I asked cautiously. He smirked. I said no questions. That night, I couldn't sleep. The man's offer replayed in my mind over and over again. $500 could make such a difference right now. But then, Mr. Patel's voice echoed in my head. Shortcuts bury you deeper. I thought about Ethan, how his shortcuts had ruined not just his life, but mine too. I couldn't go down that path, no matter how tempting it seemed. The next day, as I sat at my kitchen table updating my budget notebook, I checked my brokerage account out of habit. My heart skipped a beat when I saw it. $50 deposited into my account. My first dividend payment from the stock Mr. Patel had helped me buy. $50. It wasn't much, barely enough for groceries, but it felt monumental. It was honest money, money that had worked for me while I slept. I stared at the screen, tears welling in my eyes. This is what progress feels like, I thought. Meanwhile, news about Ethan began circulating online. His new venture had collapsed after a viral expose revealed fraudulent practices, misappropriated funds, fake contracts, unpaid workers. I read the headlines with a mix of anger and relief. Karma had finally caught up with him. As I sat at the table that night, reviewing my budget and planning my next investment, I realized something. Integrity mattered more than speed. Mr. Patel had taught me that wealth wasn't just about numbers. It was about building something solid and lasting. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was doing exactly that. I stared at my savings account. $2,000. It had taken months of meal prepping, rideshare shifts, and selling everything I could to get here. For the first time in years, I felt like I was making progress. Then the phone rang. "Your mom's in the hospital," Tara said, her voice trembling. "She collapsed at home. They're saying she needs surgery." My chest tightened. "What kind of surgery?" "Emergency gallbladder removal," she said quickly. "They're prepping her now." I grabbed my keys and rushed out the door, my mind racing. The hospital waiting room was cold and sterile, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. A nurse handed me a clipboard with forms to fill out. "The surgery is $8,000, she said matter-of-factly. "How will you be paying?" I froze, gripping the pen tightly. "8,000, I repeated, my voice cracking. She nodded sympathetically. "You can set up a payment plan if needed." That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at my savings account again. The $2,000 felt like a cruel joke compared to the $8,000 bill looming over me. Should I drain it? I thought bitterly. What's the point of saving if I can't use it when it matters? I picked up my phone and called Mr. Patel. He answered on the second ring. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately. "It's my mom," I said, my voice shaking. "She needs surgery, and the bill is $8,000. Should I just empty my savings?" "No," he said firmly. "Don't touch your savings." "But—" "Listen to me," he interrupted. "Use insurance appeals and set up a payment plan with the hospital. Negotiate every charge if you have to, but protect your progress." His words hit me like a slap in the face. Protect your progress. Reluctantly, I followed his advice. Over the next few weeks, I called the hospital's billing department repeatedly, filing appeals, and asking for itemized bills to dispute unnecessary charges. It was exhausting. Hours spent on hold and endless back-and-forth emails. But slowly, it started to pay off. Months later, I received a final statement from the hospital. The bill had been reduced by 60%. My share was now manageable with monthly payments. I sat at my desk, holding the letter in my hands, tears streaming down my face, not just from relief, but from pride. At our next meeting, Mr. Patel nodded approvingly as I told him what happened. "Resilience isn't about never falling," he said with a small smile. It's about getting back up every time you do. His words stayed with me long after I left. That night, as I updated my budget notebook and added another $50 to my savings account, I realized something. Setbacks didn't have to destroy me anymore. I could handle them and keep moving forward. I sat at my kitchen table, the morning sunlight streaming through the window. My laptop was open, and my portfolio glowed on the screen. $10,000 in savings. $10,000. It had taken 2 years of sacrifices, long rideshare shifts, and relentless budgeting to get here. But I'd done it. All my debt was paid off, and my savings account was finally something to be proud of. The rideshare job had been my lifeline, but it wasn't enough on its own. A year ago, I'd started a side hustle teaching budgeting workshops for single parents at the community center. At first, only a few people showed up, tired moms juggling bills and kids, but word spread quickly. Now, every session was packed with people desperate for answers. "How did you start?" one participant asked during a workshop last week, her pen poised over her notebook. I smiled and held up Mr. Patel's notebook, its cover worn from years of use. "By tracking every penny," I said simply. "It's not glamorous, but it works." She nodded thoughtfully, scribbling down notes as I explained how small changes had transformed my life. Later that evening, as I sat at my desk updating my budget notebook, an email notification popped up on my screen. Ethan's name flashed across the subject line. "I need your help." My stomach twisted as I opened it. His message was filled with apologies and pleas for money. "Mia," it read, "I know I've made mistakes, big ones, but I'm desperate. Please lend me $5,000 to get back on my feet." I stared at the email for a long time before pulling out Mr. Patel's notebook. Without hesitation, I scanned a copy of the first page, "Track every penny," and attached it to my reply. "This works better than scams," I wrote before hitting send. At our next workshop, I stood in front of a room filled with people who reminded me of where I'd been 2 years ago, lost, scared, drowning in debt. "Rule 1, I said firmly, holding up the notebook again. "Track every penny." I saw heads nodding as I explained how budgeting had saved me, not just financially, but emotionally too. That night, as I sat at my kitchen table reviewing my portfolio again, a sense of peace washed over me. The numbers weren't just numbers anymore. They were proof of everything I'd overcome. Mr. Patel's voice echoed in my mind. Resilience isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up every time you do. And now? Now I was standing taller than ever. The bookstore was buzzing with energy. Rows of chairs were filled with people clutching copies of my book, From Zero to $10,000. I stood at the front, smiling nervously as I adjusted the microphone. 5 years ago, I began. I was sitting in a coffee shop, staring at a bank account with $0 and wondering how I'd ever get out of the mess I was in. The crowd leaned forward, listening intently. "It wasn't easy," I continued, holding up Mr. Patel's notebook. "But this little notebook changed my life. It taught me that every penny matters, and that resilience isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up every time you do." After the event ended, I sat at a table signing books and chatting with attendees. "You've inspired me," one woman said as she handed me her copy to sign. "I've been struggling for years, but now I feel like there's hope." I smiled warmly and wrote a message in her book, "Track every penny. It's where freedom starts." As the crowd thinned, I spotted a familiar face standing near the back of the room. Mr. Patel was there, his arms crossed and his expression calm but proud. I stood up quickly and walked over to him. "Mr. Patel," I said, my voice catching slightly. "You came." He nodded with a small smile. "I wouldn't miss it." "Thank you," I said softly, tears threatening to spill over. "For everything." He patted my shoulder gently. You did the work, Mia. I just pointed you in the right direction. That night, as I sat at my desk reviewing my portfolio, a sense of peace washed over me. Passive income now covered all my bills, a milestone that felt surreal after years of struggle. My mom was debt-free, thanks to the budgeting lessons I'd taught her, and my workshops had helped hundreds of people rebuild their lives. Money wasn't my master anymore. I controlled it. As I closed my laptop and looked around my cozy home office, I thought about how far I'd come, from drowning in debt to running a financial coaching business that made a real difference in people's lives. Mr. Patel's words echoed in my mind. Pass it on. And that's exactly what I plan to keep doing.